Okay. So my AI launch is GitHub Copilot. So in the past like 2 years or so, like you were saying, Andy, generative AI is like foundationally changed a bunch of stuff in the software world. But one big piece of that, or one big thing that's been impacted, is software development. And from what I can tell, GitHub has been at the forefront of a lot of that. And so anyone who's not familiar with GitHub, it is like a platform where developers use it to manage all their code. They write code in there. They collaborate around code. It is like the go-to tool for a lot of software developers. And Copilot is their AI coding assistant, as it's referred to today, but it's turned into much more than that. And so I'm choosing this launch for a few reasons. One is just the name. So we'll talk about the name. Um, the other is just like since they launched this back in 2021, which is cool because we think of ChatGPT as a lot of like the first of a lot of this stuff, but it was back in 2021 they launched Copilot. But it has gone through this like cool evolution, and I think it's evolved in a smart way. And it's also kind of an example of like a really long, drawn out, rolling thunder in a way. And then the last is their messaging and positioning, which I think is really smart in a world where AI has a lot of like doubters and or like skeptics in terms of they don't want to lose their jobs. So let's talk about the name. They invented the name Copilot. I did a little bit of research yesterday to validate that, but they were the first ones to name their product Copilot. And now it's become like the Pampers or the Kleenex of like AI assistants, right? So everyone has Copilot. Even Microsoft, who launched their own Copilot, and Microsoft actually owns GitHub, which I didn't actually realize until I started doing some of this research. But I think it's a really cool example of how the right name can take off, and how, in this case, Copilot, I just love the name because it's such a great descriptor of the fact that this is like an assistant. It's your Copilot. It's not replacing you, sits next to you, has like the sidekick job, and it helps you do your job better, which also comes into play. And you hear about it more when I talk about the positioning and messaging. But also a really interesting example of how names can be copied. I don't understand how everyone was just able to rip off Copilot. Not sure how that happened. Maybe someone can dig into that and understand, like from a legal perspective, how that's possible. But everyone now uses Copilot. It's very much become like the descriptor of an AI assistant. The next thing is like this idea of how it's evolved, this like rolling thunder in terms of how this product evolved and how they've rolled it out over the last like 3 years. So, quick timeline for you. They launched in June of 2021. They launched Copilot in what they call technical preview, which is like their beta, like their like early access type thing. And it was initially available in early preview, and then it launched on about roughly a year later, which is like June 2022. Then in later in 2022, they actually launched what they called Copilot for Business. So one cool thing that I like about the evolution of this, and I think you're kind of seeing this with a lot of AI products, is like they start with just users, people who are looking for like interesting, AI tools that can help them evolve the way, like improve their day to day and like solve a problem for them specifically. And with the original Copilot, it actually wasn't like a chat interface. It was just building AI into their product so that it would automatically like review your code and make suggestions as you were using GitHub. And so it was a tool for individuals. But then with Copilot in 2022, it was about, hey, how do we expand this beyond the individual and make it more for like teams and broader, like the organization more broadly. Then in March 2023, now that chat and this idea of a chat interface was more like well known by people, they actually built and launched Copilot Chat. So that's like the chat interface we're all used to, where you could like drop code in there, ask it to debug it, give you feedback, all that. Now in 2024, they've launched Copilot Enterprise, which again, I like this idea of like their evolution and like bringing it broader and more up market, where now they're like, hey, we've kind of established this, we've proved it out, and we can start to now sell this and position it towards the enterprise. And then now they just launched, or in technical preview in April, what they call Copilot Workspace, which is now, again, not just making this a chat interface, but saying, hey, we're building out like a suite or a workspace for you. And they say it's developers can now brainstorm, plan, build, test, and run code in natural language. So I really like how it's this like steady progression and evolution of the product. But I also feel like it's like a smart progression based on what the customers and the market are like comfortable with and are looking for at the time. And so the last one here is their positioning and messaging. And like with the launch of Copilot, they were marketing to like a pretty skeptical audience pretty naturally, right? Like it's developers, they don't like to be marketed to, and they have a lot of sway within companies. They don't want to lose that by having AI that can replace them. So early on, they were like careful with their positioning and messaging. This is from a TechCrunch article. GitHub has partnered with OpenAI to develop this tool. It doesn't replace developers. It's just a tool that should improve productivity, make it easier to learn how to code. Another thing that says It's not saying they were writing perfect code for you or replacing a programmer. Instead, it was providing suggestions and making devs more productive. So it's all about like, hey, we help you be better at your job and move faster. Whereas like if you take Devin, a product that was released earlier this year, they actually call their product the world's first fully autonomous AI software engineer, which as a software engineer, that could be kind of scary. You're like, are you going to replace me? And there's just a lot of fear on the web of like it being replaced. Um, they also did a lot of like data to support Copilot. So like in the early preview version of it, they had 1.2 million developers used it, right? And they were able to bring a lot of data saying how it helped and like to prove out this new concept. They also surveyed 17,000 devs using it. 75% of them said it reported that when they use Copilot, they spend less manual effort on repetitive programming tasks. The other thing that I found cool is like now today, when they release this Copilot workspace, there's this whole section in the announcement that talks about this enabling a world of 1 billion developers. So it's at GitHub celebrated over 100 million developers on their platform last year. And now they said programming is a natural language. Programming in a natural language lowers the barriers of entry of who can build software. We are accelerating to a near future where 1 billion people on GitHub will control a machine just as easily as they ride a bike. So it's this idea of like a computer on every desk in every home sort of thing. They actually don't want to replace developers. They want to make more of them by making it easier to develop software. And they also said, like, at a time when a world is dependent on an in short supply of professional developers, they're actually making it easier for more people to become developers. The last thing is that I found that they were one of the first companies to shift their entire platform messaging to be like AI focused. So the success of Copilot, it actually led GitHub to further lean into AI and make it part of their platform positioning. So if you go to their site now, it says it's the world's leading AI-powered developer platform, which I think it being early on one of the first people to do that, like makes a lot of sense. Even though now you're starting to see more people do it, I think it's just a way to kind of hop onto the AI train. So all that, I think it's a pretty clear sign of a successful product launch of Copilot to see where they've come today. And I'll leave it at that.
Well done for your last spiel on season
I went
1.
over by like 10 seconds, but I appreciate you giving me the extra time.
No, I was about to say we're knocking off a couple points there. No, but I thought you did a great job, and I can speak a little bit to like that Copilot naming because you mentioned like the legality of it, which to your point, I feel like just about maybe half of AI releases, like people call it a Copilot, and we experienced something similar to that. I remember looking into it. This is back when I was at ZoomInfo, and we were launching a sales engagement tool, and we were calling it ZoomInfo Engage at the time. But there are a ton of other tools also called like company name Engage. And we looked into it, and the reason why it's pretty much like okay is because Engage is such like a broad like descriptor. Like no one can really own just like any word really. And so my guess is Copilot is also similar enough to where like it's so broad, it's not like a made up term. You can't really just like copyright it just for like the name of your product. So just a little bit of backstory there.
Yeah,
I'm torn on the name thing. Fun fact that it was the first one. Love that. So I'll give them props on that. I agree that the name Copilot is very smart, especially in those early days of, as you mentioned, there's so much fear about AIs replacing us versus being like, no, like you can be better with AI by your side. It's like Batman and Robin. However, I do think it has become commoditized. And like when I hear the name Copilot now, if you just said like, I use Copilot, I would have no idea what product you mean because I've like, okay, that's almost every AI product out there. And so I think it's both a challenge and an opportunity for them, I would say.
Yeah.
I would say too, I feel like that messaging and positioning, and this is like the challenge with really nailing a launch early on. Like if other people take it, like some people are going to probably remember and just associate it with you or like the originator, whoever came up with it first. But then if so many people take it, then it can be hard to like differentiate after the fact, like as time goes on. Like the same thing with like that, oh, we don't replace devs, we just make them more productive. If I had a nickel, like for every time I've heard that, but like insert different like user or like persona, like job title for AI,
copyright,
everyone says that now. And so it's really not differentiated or memorable in really any way, shape, or form. But you know, at the time when they were launching it, I'm sure that helped bring in users for that initial, you know, big push. But that is an interesting point. Like you probably have to evolve that messaging and positioning over time.
Yeah, that is why like I kind of like this idea of like the 1 billion developers. Like
Yes.
not it's they're starting to leave, not like they're leaving that messaging behind in a way, but it's like, hey, if you productivity is one thing, but we just want to make it easy for everyone to develop code because hey, our world's gonna need a lot of software developers. Like they talked about this other idea too of like we want people who are like people to be involved in more of like the like systems thinkers and like more of the strategic stuff, but all the boilerplate stuff, let's let the AI kind of do that for you. And I think it's more of like getting people to think about, oh no, we'll focus on the fun, interesting stuff, not all this other junk that AI can automate. So yeah, I think it's like, how do you take that idea of we're not going to replace you, but continuously like evolve it into it? Don't be afraid of this product. It's actually going to help you and help the industry and all that.
Yeah, I like it. It's like a call to arms, a bit of like a rallying cry, a bit of a mission behind it. And people love that. And, whether that will be sustainable for them moving forward or just another phase of their differentiation and positioning, who's to say? But I think that that was a smart evolution for them from what you said, Andy, early on, which quickly becomes commoditized. And now they're saying something different, but it's a natural progression from what they said originally.